you. Shall we write a start or shall we write another 5 minutes? We'll make start.
Shabbat Shalom. Okay, we're very privileged today to have from Frank's sabbatical another guest rabbi, Rabbi Mark Solomon. I believe you normally preside at Leicester, is it? And Edinburgh, so coming up one way, and it's going to be slightly more of a traditional kind of service with sort of more of a cantorial approach, which we're looking forward to. So, leave it to Mark.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm here from time to time because Lobo is my partner, and so when he's on duty and I'm not on duty, I come along with him. But today we're both on duty, so I think that's rather nice to be seen together with him and Joseph. We start with Martovu on service number 4, page 122. Page 122, please rise. ואני תפילתי לך אדוני את רצון אלוהים ברוב חסדך ענני באמת אישך. Eternal God, we come before you surrounded by members of our community. With them we share our happiness and it becomes greater, our troubles and they become smaller. May we never be too mean to give nor too proud to receive, for in giving and receiving we discover you and begin to understand the meaning of life. Let us not separate ourselves from the true strength of our community, the experience and wisdom of old people, the hopes of the young, and the examples of care and courage which sustain us. Give us an open mind and a generous heart to welcome those who need us and to admit your presence into our daily life. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, for the strength that comes to us through our community. לעולם יהי אדם ירא שמיים בסתר ובגלוי ומודה על האמת ודובר אמת בלבבו. Sovereign of all worlds, we lay our supplications before you, relying not on our merit, but on your abundant mercy. For what are we? What is our life? And what our piety? What our goodness? And what our strength? What can we say in your presence, eternal God? Are not the mightiest of us as nothing before you? The famous as though they had never lived, the learned as if they had no knowledge, the wise as if without understanding. For most of what we do is futile, and our life on earth is but a span. Our superiority over other animals amounts to little, for all is vanity. Nevertheless, we are your people, children of your covenant, and called to your service. Therefore it is right that we should thank and praise you, to proclaim your holiness, and daily say before you,
Manayim
אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, המולך בפי עמו, משובח ומפואר, לשון חסידיו ואבותיו. משבחות ובזמירות, נגדל חבניך מלכנו, יחיד חיי העולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מהולל, ותשבחות. At dawn and dusk I seek you, reach out and look to you. This soul athirst, I yearn for you, I am a beggar at your door. The galaxies cannot contain you, yet you dwell in my inmost being. I hold your glory in my heart. My love for you exceeds my speech. So I will praise your name, Eternal One, as long as your breath of life remains within me. Praise be the Eternal One forever. Amen and amen. Praise be the Eternal God, the God of Israel, who does wonderful things. Let God's glorious name be praised forever, and let the whole earth be filled with God's glory.
Amen.
Amen and amen. To whom our praise ascends. You guide the world with constant love, your children with tender care. To you alone we give thanks. But though our mouths should overflow with song as the sea, our tongues with exultation as the roaring waves, and our lips with praise as heaven's wide expanse, and though our eyes shine as the sun and moon, our arms spread forth like the wings of eagles, and our feet speed swiftly as hinds, still we could not fully thank you, eternal God, for your infinite kindness to our ancestors and to us. Therefore the limbs you have formed in us, the spirit you have breathed into us, and the tongue you have set in our mouths, all shall unite to thank and praise, extol you and exalt you, the sovereign God. Every mouth shall thank you, every tongue bear witness to you, every knee shall bend to you, every body bow down to you, every heart shall revere you, and every fibre of our being shall sing your praise. For so it is written, all my bones shall say, who is like you, Eternal One? Therefore we extol you and proclaim your glory, and praise your holy name, as it is said, praise the Eternal One of my soul, let all that is within me praise God's holy name. Adonai malach, geot lavesh, lavesh Adonai os itazar, aftikon tevel batimot, nachon kisachra meyos, meolam ata, nasu naharok Adonai, nasu naharot olam, nasu naharot doyam, olot ma'im rabim, avivim mishpereyam, avim amarot Adonai. This wonderful composition that wonderful composition is by the great Louis Lewandowski, the same composer at many other things that we sing. And it depicts the rolling of the rivers and the waves of the sea. It's a wonderful piece. Yishtabach Shimcha Lad Malkeinu Hael HaMelech HaGadol VaHaKadosh Bashamayim Uvaretz Ki Lecha Na'eh Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Elohei Avoteinu Shir U'Shvacha Halev Zimra Berachot V'Horaot Me'ata Ve'ad Olam Baruch Ata Adonai Abocher V'Shirei Zimra. Turn to page 135 for Lewandowski's part. Baruch et Adonai Haborach. Baruch Adonai Haborach le'olam va'ed. Please be seated. Page 136, please join me as we read the first blessing before the Shema, the blessing for creation and light. We praise you, eternal one, our God, sovereign of the universe, maker of light and creator of darkness, author of peace and creator of all things. In your mercy you give light to the earth and all who live on it, and in your goodness you renew creation continually, day by day. How manifold are your works, O God! With wisdom you made them all. The world is full of your creations. Your handiwork proclaims your praise. The radiant stars bear witness to your glory. We praise you, O God, creator of light. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. And we continue in song in the last two words of the page in Hebrew. Ha'erinenu b'toratecha v'ta'abek libeinu b'mitzvotecha v'yachei levaveinu le'yahava u'yira et shemecha Ivanu v'chata le'yachedecha le'yahava ha'erinenu v'toratecha v'ta'abek libeinu b'mitzvotecha le'yachei levaveinu le'yahava u'yira et shemecha Baruch at Adonai Abocher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha u'b'chol yadecha Ve'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinatam levanecha v'dibartam v'shivtecha b'beitecha u'v'lechtecha b'derech עשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיהם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Good and beautiful and true, sound, established and enduring are these words now and forever. True it is, eternal one, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy Moses, Miriam and all Israel together sang to you this song. יחד כולם אחותו, המליכו ויאמרו, אדוני ימלוך, אדוני Chant the first part together. Adonai Sevatatita Ufia Gittehilatecha. Adonai Sevatatita Ufia Gittehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor, Ha'anora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, Koneh Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריח השמש ומוריד הטל. מחכה לחיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים. ומקיים אמונתו ישתנה עפר מי כמוך בגבורות ומי דומה להחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני בחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך. קדוש, קדוש, אדוני צבאות, בכל הארץ כבודו, כבודו מלא עולם, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך, כי מחכים אנחנו לך, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי לציון, לדור ודור, hallelujah. From generation to generation we will make known your greatness. To the end of time we will proclaim your holiness. Your praise, O our God, shall never depart from our lips. We praise you, Eternal One, the Holy God. Please be seated. You inspired our ancestors to hallow this day for your service. When upon its coming we pause to contemplate our life, we learn anew that we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for the Sabbath day and for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. In our worship, help us to take into our hearts its message of holiness and consecrate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and good. Betali Beno, Betali Beno, Leone Habet. Be'adne Hileno, Adonai Eloheinu, Be'avau V'ratzon, Shabbat Godshecha, Shabbat Godshecha. Yanuchova Israel, Yanuchova Israel, Mekadesh Shemecha. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Let's read together in Hebrew on page 144. Say Adonai Eloheinu B'Amcha Yisrael U'Tfilatam Be'ahavat Tekabel U'Tehil Ratzon Tamid Avodat Yisrael Amecha Baruch atah Adonai Shorcha Levadecha Ira Ha'avod. And we continue in English. We give thanks that you, Eternal One, are our God, as you are the God of our ancestors. You are the rock of our life, the power that shields us in every age. We thank and praise you for our lives which are in your hand, for our souls which are in your keeping, for the signs of your presence we encounter every day, and for your wondrous gifts at all times, morning, noon, and night. We praise you, O God, source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due. Sim Shalom Tova Bracha Chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'kol Yisrael. Amecha. Baruchenu Avinu kolanu ke'echad be'or panecha. Kive'or panecha natan lanu Adonai Eloheinu Torat Chayim Ve'avat Chesed U'Tzedaka U'Racha Ve'Rachamim Ve'Chayim Ve'Shalom. V'tov enecha levarech et amcha Yisrael ve'et kol ha'amim b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני עושה Turn now to page 481, page 481 for the Kriyat HaTorah, the service of the reading of the Torah.
En kamocha Elohim Adonai v'tevasecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshatecha b'chol ormanot Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimloch le'olam va'el Adonai oz lamo yitem Adonai yevarech et amo l'shalom.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Eloheinu, Adonai Adonai iti, Adonai ma shemo yachdav. Lecha Adonai ha'gedula, ve'ha'gevura, ve'ha'tived, ve'ha'ezra, ve'ha'avot, ve'ha'netzach, ve'ha'od. Today's parasha is Vayikra, the first portion in the book of Leviticus, and because the early chapters of the book of Leviticus deal entirely with temple rituals and especially animal sacrifices, it's not usually the most gripping and compelling section of the Torah, especially for us as liberal Jews. But we do follow the custom of reading from the weekly portion. So there are two bits of the portion of Vayikra that I normally choose from. One is the vegetarian bit that deals with the meal offerings, the flour offerings, and often it falls just before Pesach, and it talks about matzah, unleavened meal offerings. But doesn't this year it falls before Purim because it's a leap year and everything's a bit out. So we're not going to read that one today. Instead, we're going to read the other bit that I find slightly more interesting than the details of animals' entrails, and that is Leviticus 5, verses 14 to 26, to the end of the chapter. In the Sonsilo Chumash, you'll find it on page 622, and in the Cloud Chumash, you'll find it on page 776. Okay, and so that is what we'll read now, 622, beginning with verse 14 towards the bottom of the column in the Sonsilo. Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, נפש כי תמעול מעל, וחטא בשגגה מקודשי אדוני, והביא את השמות אדוני, אל תמים מן הצאן, ברכך בכסף שקלים, בשקל הקודש רשם, ואת אשר חטא מן הקודש ישלם, ואת חמישיתו יוסף עליו, ונתן אותו לכהן, והכהן יכפר עליו, ואל השם ונסלח לו. The Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, any person who sins by misappropriation, and they do so unknowingly by misappropriating some of the sacred property of the Eternal One. So anything that had been dedicated for the use of the temple was forbidden for ordinary use, but somebody not realizing that particular, lamb had been dedicated as a sacrifice went and ate it. So that's an example of that. Then such a person shall bring his guilt offering to the Eternal One, an unblemished ram from the flock, according to your valuation, according to the silver shekels, by the holy shekel weight. There were different shekel weights, and there was one that was called the shekel hakodesh, the temple shekel, as a guilt offering. And whatever he is sinned with from the holy things, he shall repay, and add a fifth on top of it. And shall give this to the priest, and the priest shall make atonement for him with the ram of the guilt offering, and it will be forgiven to him. ואם הנפש הכיתתה ועשתה אחת מכל מצוות אדוני אשר לא תעשנה ולא ידע השם ונשא עוונו והביא אל תמים מן הצאן ברכך לשם אל הכהן וכיפר עליו הכהן על שגיגתו אשר שגג והוא לא ידע ונסלח לו אשם הוא אשם לאדוני. And if any person shall sin and transgress any of the commandments that should not be transgressed, so this is someone who transgresses a negative commandment, thou shalt not, but does so unknowingly, then that person bears guilt and shall bear his iniquity, and shall bring an unblemished ram from the flock according to your valuation as a guilt offering to the priest. And the priest shall make atonement for him for the unwitting sin that he has committed when he was unaware, and this shall be forgiven for him. This is the guilt offering, for he has certainly incurred guilt before the Eternal One. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, נפש כי תחטא ומעלה מעל באדוני, וביקש במיתו, בפיקדון ובתשומת יד, או בגזל או עשק את המיתו, או מצא ודע וכי חשבה ונשבע על שקר, על אחד מכל אשר יעשה האדם לחטוא והנה. והיה כי יכתב השם והשיב את הגזלה אשר גזל, או את העושק אשר עשק, או את הפיקדון אשר הופקד איתו, או את האבדה אשר מצא, מכל אשר שווה עליו לשקר ושילם אותו בראשו וחמישיתה ויוסף עליו אשר הוא לא יתננו ביום אשמתו ואת אשמתו יביא לאדוני איל תמיר מן הצאן ברכך לאשם אל הכהן וכיפר עליו הכהן לפני אדוני ונסלח לו על אחד מכל אשר יעשה לאשמה. The Eternal One spoke to Moses saying, if any person sins and misappropriates something before the Eternal One by lying to his fellow about a deposit, so if someone had entrusted property to someone for safekeeping and the person who has it then lies and says, no, you never gave it to me, or something he takes by violence or robbery or a fraud, by defrauding his neighbour, or if someone finds lost property and lies about it and swears an oath to this lie. For any of these things which a person shall do and sin by them, then when he is aware of his sin and his guilt, he shall repay what he has robbed, or what he has defrauded, or the deposit that was entrusted to him, or the lost property which he found, or whatever it is that he has sworn falsely about, and he shall repay it the original amount, and he shall add an extra fifth on top as a penalty, giving it to the person to whom it belongs on the day that his guilt is found out. And he shall bring his guilt offering to the Eternal One, an unblemished ram from the flock, according to your valuation, I'm not sure what that actually means, as a guilt offering to the priest. And the priest shall make atonement for him before the Eternal One, and it shall be forgiven to him for any of these things which a person shall do and incur guilt by them. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. Please be seated. Now, for the Haftarah, we have a slightly odd situation. I'll explain why. This Shabbat is one of the 4 special Sabbaths appointed since ancient times around this time of the year. This one is called Shabbat Zachor, the Sabbath of remember, and it's always the Shabbat before Purim. And it's called Shabbat Zachor because there is a special Torah reading, an extra one on top of the weekly portion. So in Orthodox synagogues they would get out 2 scrolls and read a short portion from the second scroll from the book of Deuteronomy, where Moses tells the people, remember what the Amalekites did to you when you came out of Egypt, how they attacked the weak at the rear, I'm sorry, talking too long, the weak at the rear of the Israelite march and had no mercy. And so remember to wipe out the memory of Amalek, you shall not forget. Now, we don't tend to read this in liberal synagogues because it smacks a little bit of genocide, wiping out an entire tribe or people. So we don't tend to read that. But now I've told you about it. And there's a special haftarah that goes with this portion. I wasn't really keen to have it read this morning, but that's what's been prepared.
That's exactly what I was when I was reading it, and I thought,
Yes. I don't think it's done. I don't think it's done in most liberal synagogues, but there we are. So the Torah portion is a little bit about the Amalekites, and the Haftarah is the next episode in the story of Israelites and Amalekites. It's the battle of King Saul, the first Israelite king, against the Amalekites, and he's commanded by God through Samuel to wipe out the Amalekites entirely, everybody, all the animals, all the people, everybody. So he wipes out all the people, but he keeps the animals alive, as you can hear, and he also doesn't kill the king, King Agag. And for this, Samuel gets into a right tizzy and tells him off and tells him that for this disobedience he will be stripped of the kingship. His family will not become a dynasty. Now, why do we read all of this stuff before Purim? Any ideas?
Because Haman is supposed to be a Megillite.
That's right. In the Megillah, Haman is identified as Haman ben Hamadata ha-Agagi, the Agagite, and Agag was the king of Amalek. So it's clear that Haman is a distant descendant of the Amalekites, and Mordechai, who's Mordechai descended from? Yes, but who's he descended from? So according to the Megillah, he's descended from Kish, the father of Saul. So what we have in the book of Esther is actually, it's a made-up story really, but it's about sort of the final episode in the long and sorry tale of Israelites versus Amalekites. It was all started by the Amalekites. They attacked us first. But we finished them off. And who finishes them off finally for good? Mordechai and Esther, because they get Haman and his 10 sons hanged, and that's the lot. That's the end of the Amalekites. So that's the reason for it. Now, as I say, that we're uncomfortable with the sort of genocidal implications of all this and the general violence of it. I noticed that the reading has been abbreviated a little bit, and it stops before the end bit when Samuel cuts King Agag in pieces before the Lord. So you're spared that, except that I told you. So interestingly, this Haftarah doesn't appear at all in the Plaut Chumash because Rabbi Plaut clearly didn't approve of it. Instead, he puts in the passage from the book of Esther for Shabbat Zachor. It is in the Sonsino Chumash at the back, but only in Hebrew, so that doesn't really help. If you want to follow in the JPS Tanakh, if you have one with you, it's page 440. And it's the first book of Samuel, chapter 15, verses 10 to 26. And over to you.
Thank you. Don't have to say anything now. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, tzil kol ha'olamim, tzadik b'chol ha'toros, ha'oel ha'ne'emon, ha'ameir v'oseh. Oh, sorry. I'm doing the alphabet first. You have to get before that. Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bocha b'nevi'im tovim, v'ratzah v'dreihem ha'ne'emorim be'emes. Baruch atah Adonai, habocha haTorah, v'Moshe avdo Yisrael amo, uvdavdei ha'emes v'tzedek. The word of the Lord then came to Samuel. I regret that I made Saul king, for he has turned away from me and has not carried out my commands. Samuel was distressed, and he entreated the Lord all night long. Early in the morning, Samuel came to meet Saul. Samuel was told Saul went to Carmel, where he erected a monument for himself. Then he left and went down to Gilgal. When Samuel came to Saul, Saul said to him, Blessed are you of the Lord. I have fulfilled the Lord's command. Then what? Demanded Samuel. Is this bleating of sheep in my ears, and the lowing of oxen that I hear? Saul answered, they were brought from the Amalekites, for the troops spared the choicest, and the sheep and the oxen, for sacrificing to the Lord your God. And we prescribed the rest. Samuel said to Saul, stop. Let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night. Speak, he replied. And Samuel said, you may look small to yourself, but you are the head of the tribes of Israel. The Lord anointed you king over Israel. And the Lord sent to you a mission, saying, go and prescribe the sinful Amalekites. Make war on them until you have exterminated them. Why did you disobey the Lord and swoop down on the spoil in defiance of the Lord's will? Saul said to Samuel, but I did obey the Lord. I performed the mission on which the Lord sent me. I captured King Agag of Amalek, and I prescribed Amalek, and the troops took from the spoil some sheep and oxen, the best of which had been prescribed to sacrifice to the Lord your God at Galil. But Samuel said, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as obedience to the Lord's command? Surely obedience is better than sacrifice, compliance than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, defiance like the iniquity of a teraphim. Because you rejected the Lord's command, he has rejected you as king. Saul said to Samuel, I did wrong to transgress the Lord's command and your instructions, but I was afraid of the troops, and I yielded to them. Please forgive my offence and come back with me, and I will bow low to the Lord. But Samuel said to Saul, I will not go back with you, for you have rejected the Lord's command, and the Lord has rejected you as king over Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Sur kol ha'olomim, Tzadik b'chol hadoros, Ho'eh ha'ne'emon, Ho'ameh v'oseh, V'hamdaber u'malkeim, Shekol devarov, Emes v'tzedek. Kol ha'torah, V'al ha'tovos, Avodah, V'al ha'ne'emarim, V'al yom ha'shavas hazeh. שנוסתם לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושו ולמלוכו לכבוד ולשפע אורץ על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומפרחים עושך יספרך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד.
ברוך אתה אדוני
מקדש
השבת.
Lovely Ashkenazi pronunciation. Don't hear it often in liberal synagogues, but why not? Now for the prayers of the congregation. I wonder if anybody would like to... Who normally holds it?
Normally the rabbi.
The rabbi holds it. Right, so would anyone like to come up and read, or stand where you are maybe, and read the prayer for the royal family, page 484. Okay, thank you.
Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth, and all the royal family, for those who govern our country, and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it may be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity.
Amen.
Amen. And would someone like to lead the congregational prayer?
Eternal God, as you blessed our ancestors in generations past, bless now this congregation, its leaders and its members and all who enter the synagogue to meet, study and pray. Comfort the sorrowing hearts among us and heal those in anxiety or pain. May we all find here community and friendship, renewal of purpose and hope, a deeper understanding of our heritage and a sense of your abiding presence. Bless all congregations of the House of Israel throughout the world, that those who live under oppressive rule will soon be free, and may we all unite to witness to your truth and do your will.
Amen.
Amen. And to read the prayer for Israel.
Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill an age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land not for the benefit of all its inhabitants, and to implement the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with one another and in peace with their neighbours, and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem.
Amen.
Amen.
And a special prayer now, in the light of the terrible and tragic events in New Zealand yesterday. This is a prayer written by an American liturgical writer, Alden Solovey, and it's entitled Prayer After Racist Violence Against Houses of Worship. First it addresses us, and then it addresses God. O people of conscience, cry out. Cry out against arrogance. Cry out against hatred and anger. Cry out against violence and oppression. For God requires us to stand in the name of justice and freedom. For God requires us to oppose terror, to muster our power and energy against racist aggression, and to protect all houses of prayer. O God, we implore you, look down upon the suffering perpetrated against churches, mosques, synagogues and temples, against houses of worship in so many lands, by the hand of wickedness, by the hand of malevolence, by the hand of ignorance and sin. Today we remember with grief, pain, the attacks on the An-Nur Mosque and the Linwood Mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand. We think of all of those who lost their precious lives, men, women and children, cut down without mercy. We think of those injured in hospital, whose lives are now in the balance. We think of those who are bereaved and coming to terms with such sudden and dreadful loss. We think of those who are terrorized. With your gentle and loving hand, God of shelter, unite all of your children under your canopy of hope and love. Bring the light of salvation and healing to the four corners of the earth, and let us say,
Amen.
We turn now to page 607, page 607. We have the prayer for healing, and I shall pause for you to name anyone you know who is in need of healing of any kind. Eternal God, we thank you for the gift of life and for the healing powers that you have implanted within your creatures. Sustain, we pray, our friends, our fellow congregants, our loved ones, through their time of illness.
My husband, Ray Rupert, who's in St Luke's Hospice.
This is my mother-in-law, Mabel, who's now at hospital but in respite care, who's really fighting hard after her surgery at 86.
I think of Hannah Keller and Gary Dixon and of Rafe Brown. God grant them courage and strength to endure pain and weakness, Teach us how best to help them by our love and care for them and by our own composure. May they and all who are ill know that you are with them, comforting them and reinforcing their will to get well. May their afflictions soon be ended, and may they return in health to family and friends. Yhi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'le'avotenu, shetishloch me'ala refuah shlema, refuat hanefesh u'refat haguf, l'chol yedideinu u'kroveinu, v'toch shar hacholim, shabati milizok, refuah krova lavo, baruch atah Adonai, rofei hacholim. We turn back now to the end of the Torah service, page 485, 6? Yeah. 187. Hallelujah, et Shem Adonai, ki nizkar shemo levado. God's teaching is perfect. God's word is unfailing. God's precepts are right. God's commandments are clear. God's doctrine is pure. God's guidance is true. Lekach tov natati lachem, torati al ta'azovu. Behold, a good doctrine has been given you, do not forsake it. It is a tree of life to those who hold it fast, and all who cling to it find happiness. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are Friends, waking up yesterday to the appalling news from New Zealand, that horrific massacre, 49 people who had gone to the mosque on Friday to pray. It took me back years and years to 1994, in February when I woke up to the news of the massacre in Hebron by Baruch Goldstein, a Jewish member of the fascist Kach movement, believed in driving all the Arabs out of Israel. And because it had just been Shabbat Shuvah, Shabbat Zachor, this Sabbath of remembrance, when we read about the duty to destroy Amalek, to wipe out the memory even of Amalek, Baruch Goldstein was inspired to take that into his own hands. He saw Palestinians as Amalek. And so he took his gun and walked into the great mosque at the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hebron. And like the chap yesterday, gunned down the Muslims at prayer. And of course, it will take us all back to other times, other news. The horrific shooting in Pittsburgh last October, when Jews at the Shabbat morning service were attacked and killed. And there have been Copts at church in Egypt attacked and killed, and countless Muslims, especially Shia Muslims, gunned down in their mosques by Sunni Muslims. And so it goes on and on, this tale of violence, whether it's in the name of God, as it was for Baruch Goldstein, whether it's in the name of white supremacism attacking the invaders. Should we be observing Shabbat Zachor now in our time? Should we preserve the memory of the attacks of the Amalekites and the response of the Israelites, and our duty to wipe out the memory of Amalek? The answer of the founders of liberal Judaism was clear and unambiguous. No, we should not. Not only did they abolish Shabbat Zachor, they abolished Purim itself. If no Purim, then why have a Shabbat Zachor? They abolished Purim, and some of you, I dare say, remember the times when Purim was not observed in liberal synagogues at all. Yes? Why did they abolish Purim? Well, one reason, they said, was because it has no historical basis. All the evidence suggests that the whole story is a very cleverly and carefully made up story. The whole plot with Esther and Mordecai and Haman and the rest of it. No records of it whatsoever in any of the textual or archaeological sources from ancient Persian times, which are quite well documented. But of course, there's a bit of a danger in that argument. If you start abolishing festivals because they have no historical basis, well, do we really believe that 600,000 Israelites marched out of Egypt on a particular Pesach night? Do we really believe that they all stood at Mount Sinai and received the Torah? Well, we don't know for sure, but yeah, I think lots of festivals will be in danger if we go down that road. But there was a much more important argument for the founders of liberal Judaism, because the Megillah is a violent book. We all know the nice bits of the plot, Esther going to the king and all the rest of it. But the bit that I guess we don't normally read in liberal synagogues is what happens in around chapters 8 and 9, which is the Jews attacking their enemies, as they're given permission to do by the king, now that he's under Esther and Mordecai's thumb. And so the Jews attack their enemies, and instead of them getting exterminated, it's their enemies who get exterminated. 75,000 people massacred in one day, we're told. Is that really something to read about and have a party about? Well, for the liberal founders, for Matic and Montague and Montefiore and all the rest of them, no, it wasn't. And so Purim was simply dropped from the calendar. So why do we now have Purim? And I didn't check before. Are we having Purim here?
Yeah, well, downstairs.
Downstairs, I'm sure they are.
I'll make an announcement about it. I'm going to be extra.
Why do we now have Purim? Lots of liberal synagogues now make a big deal of Purim, including even the LJS, the bastion of classical liberal Judaism. Although I have to tell you that Rabbi David Goldberg, who some of you might know, always made a point of not turning up for Purim. But there we are. So, why do we now have Purim? Well, between the early liberal founders 100 and so years ago and at our times, lots of stuff happened. The Shoah, above all, happened. And whether or not Haman in the Megillah, this supposed descendant of the King Agag who had been chopped up by Samuel, whether Haman was a historical character or just a made-up one, there's no question that Hitler was a historical character, all too real and all too recent. And so Haman, as it were, lived and breathed and existed in our times. So the message of the Megillah, of the threat of extermination and the need to stand up strongly against it, to use whatever wiles and whatever resources we have to stand up against our destruction, against our extermination by any Haman or any Hitler, is a message that became only too relevant and immediate for a later generation of liberal Jews. So there were other reasons perhaps why Purim came back as well. People got more traditional and a nice happy festival, so why not do it? But the real reason, I think, is because Purim now means something very real to us. I'll tell you a little anecdote about that before I continue. Some of you may have known the late and lamented and wonderful Margaret Regal at the LJS, one of the stalwarts of the synagogue, a most marvellous woman, a very strong classical liberal Jew. And when I started working at the LJS years and years ago, and we had Purim, I was surprised that Margaret Regal turned up. Lots of the other sort of generation of those who didn't do Purim just kept away, like Rabbi Goldberg. But Margaret Regal was there. I said, Margaret, I'm surprised to see you. I didn't think Purim would be your thing. She said, no, she said. She said, Margaret was very involved with a group called the 35s, who worked and campaigned and did all sorts of things for Soviet Jewry in the 1970s, when the Jews in the Soviet Union were oppressed, forbidden to leave, forbidden to observe Judaism. And Margaret and her husband George and many others used to make trips to the Soviet Union, smuggle in Jewish things, Talaisim and Sidurim and things to help the Jews there keep their link with Judaism. She said, I discovered in my work with the 35, when we used to go to the Soviet Union, that the most important thing for them was Purim. There were no rabbis. You couldn't go to synagogue, at least not if you wanted to have a job. So there's no Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, all those festivals that need synagogues and rabbis and Torah scrolls and all that. But Purim, what do you need? It's a party. You need some vodka and you're good to go. And she said it was Purim that kept the spirit of the refuseniks alive, that kept their link with Judaism and their determination to survive what they were going through. And I was so impressed by this testimony from Margaret Regal. It really kind of converted me a bit back to Purim as well. So, not my favourite festival anyway, but so Purim is relevant to us. And what happens in the Megillah? Haman goes to the king and says, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples, and their ways are not like the ways of other peoples, and they don't keep the king's laws. It's not worth your while, O king, to let them survive. Come on, give me permission to wipe them out. And if it helps, I'll take all their money and give it to you as well. There's a financial incentive. And so the king takes off his ring and gives it to Haman and says, go ahead. There is a certain people that are not like the rest of the people. They're outsiders, they're aliens, they're invaders. It's not worth keeping them alive. One could put exactly those words in the mouth of that guy, I won't name him because we don't name people like that, who took all of his guns and his hatred and went into those mosques yesterday. New Zealand, it's already 2 days ago, and murdered those people. It is the same argument, the same hatred. He called them invaders. They're just people, simple people, probably quite poor people, some of whom had no doubt, we don't know exactly who they were yet, but some of whom had no doubt come as refugees from war-torn countries, or had come to seek a better life in New Zealand, that byword for peace and quiet and snowy mountains and green forests and nothing ever happens there. That's what Australians think anyway. And this particular malevolent Australian took his hatred, his anger, and not only his, the hatred and anger of so many people who think like him. He says he was inspired by the guy who drove into the crowd at Finsbury Park Mosque last year and killed one person and could have killed many more. He was inspired by Anders Breivik, who gunned down the children of the Labour Party in their summer camp in Norway. No doubt, although I haven't heard that specifically, he was inspired by the guy who walked into the Or L'Simcha, Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh last October and shot the Jews at prayer. It's the same hatred, and it endures and it persists. So what do we do about it? We endure and we persist. We stand up to it. We bear witness against it. And we join with all other people in the world, the vast majority of people, to be fair, who believe that we are all human beings, we are all at bottom the same, and we should all just get on with one another. In the Torah passage that we read earlier, it talks about the guilt offering, but there's a strange list of guilt offerings for different things. I'm not going to go into the details of the offering, but there is one word that is used, the word ma'al, which means to misappropriate, and it usually means misappropriating sacred property. Yeah? Kevin making off with the shul funds, God forbid. Never do such a thing. But that's ma'ilah, that is the misappropriation of what belongs to God. But funnily enough, when it talks about robbery and violence in the next paragraph, it uses exactly the same word, ma'al. That too is a misappropriation, and it comes across as surprising there, but what is it telling us? That a crime against humanity, such as was committed in New Zealand, unquestionably a crime against humanity, that is also a crime against God. It's not just killing individual human beings, or that is the worst thing that you can do, but is also trying to destroy something eternal, something transcendent. He's trying to destroy the human spirit, the image of God, the sense of holiness of people at prayer, of whatever faith they may be. When we stand up to crimes against humanity and the hatred that breeds them, we stand up for God, for holiness, for a transcendent ideal of goodness, which is the highest aspiration that we should all put at the centre of our lives. And so now, as I conclude these reflections, we're going to hear an anthem sung by Lobo, which is a poem by Hannah Senesh. Initially, Joseph suggested we sing Eli, Eli, that beautiful poem about the human spirit, the human heart, and the glory of nature. But there's another poem by Hannah Senesh, We use it at Hanukkah time, and we also use it on Yom Kippur afternoon in the Martyrology. And it's Ashrei HaGafrur, blessed is the match that is consumed in kindling flame. And it honours those who die for their faith, as those poor people did in Christchurch, as so many of our people and other peoples have done throughout history. So can I just suggest that we actually rise while Lobo sings Ashrei HaGafrur.
Ashrei HaGafrur, shenis rabei hitzis lehamot. Ashrei HaGafrur, shemarabei sitrei lemamot. Ashrei HaLevavot, sheyanu lachago mechavod. Ashrei HaGafrur, shenis rabei hitzis levavot.
Thank you, Lobo. So we turn now to Aleinu, page 520, page 520. And today we're going to sing together right through the first paragraph of the Aleinu. Aleinu l'shaveach l'ador hakol, l'teichenu lanu yosef reshit, asher sam chelkeinu liacher et shemo, v'gor aleinu l'hamlik malchuto, v'anachnu koreim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. Notei shamayim ve'yosed haaretz, u'mosavek harav b'shamayim himal, u'shrinatu zo, v'govnei merovim, hu Eloheinu Elod, efes makeinu, efes unato, kakazo v'zorato, v'yadata hayom, ידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת עינות. Trusting in you, eternal God, we hope soon to behold the glory of your might, when false gods will vanish from our hearts and idolatry cease forever. Help us to perfect the world by bringing it under your unchallenged rule, when all will invoke your name, relinquish evil, and turn to you alone. May all who dwell on earth come to know that to you every knee must bend and every tongue swear loyalty. Before you let them humble themselves, and to your glorious name let them give honor. Let all submit to your sovereign rule. May that time come soon and last forever. For ultimate sovereignty is yours, and to all eternity you will reign in glory. As it is written, the Eternal One shall reign forever. Creator of the universe, you give us life in which joys and sorrows are commingled in accordance with your wisdom, and you send death with its promise of eternal peace. Today we think of Sophia Ash, mother of Janet Riddleson, of Regina Brown, a friend of Lindsay Cohen, of Lewis Goodman, a husband of Gertrude Goodman, and Harry Minsberg, father of Jacqueline Kaplan. And we remember Mark Cohen, the father of Shirley Ariel. We also think of those so cruelly murdered in Christchurch, their bereaved families. And we pray that, dreadful and unforgivable as their murder is, their deaths will serve as a warning to all of us of the dangers of hatred and prejudice, and the need to stand firm in the name of love of our fellow human beings and the honouring of all life. Are there any others you'd like to remember before we say Kaddish today? Teach us, O God, to accept humbly and courageously whatever burden is laid upon us. Comfort those who mourn, and let the light of faith illumine the darkness of their sorrow with the hope of immortality. Strengthen us at all times with an unfailing trust in your providence. As we join together and say, Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, Yalmad yivrach v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chayei l'chol Beit Yisrael, v'agalav v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah v'barach v'galam v'lamei al-mayah. Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Yitamar, Yitamar, Yitaseh, Yitadar, Yitaleh, Yitalach, Shmei Dikudusha v'richu, Ve'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Tush b'chata v'nechemata, Da'amiran v'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shelabarabba min Shemaya, V'chayim aleinu v'akol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom v'imolav, Hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'akol Yisrael, v'akol b'nei Adam, Amen. Please be seated. Do you have announcements now?
Yeah, I'll do a quick announcement. I'll wait till for Kiddush, but we're still going to carry on. But as soon as it's finished, I think we need to go down there. There might be some... Quick announcement. Purim is going to be a user-friendly Purim, and I'm going to be Esther, so it's worth coming along just to watch that. Okay. Friday, I'm hosting a service at my home. If anyone's interested, let me know. And next up, we've got Nathan taking the service. And also, I'd like to thank Mark for adding a new dimension to our service. It's been most entertaining, and it's been hard not to applaud after each song. I know traditions. Go for Don't Know Long.
So I'm sorry it's a little bit longer today. That's what happens with music, plus I talk a lot. So we'll turn to page 525. We're giving you an Adon Olam by Sholem Secunda, who is a composer who also wrote By Mir Bist Shame, if you know that classic. This is another of his. Do join in as you catch on to the melody, especially the chorus and the Olam Olam Malach Malach. You'll hear. Join in. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nira Le'yet Rasa V'chetz Adon Atzai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam 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 Asher Malach 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 B'terem Kol Yetzir Nira Adon Olam Olam